The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 146. Bothersome Junk. The one who stopped Tang Fan was Zhou Jing, not a nameless junior but the husband of Princess Chengqing. These days, he managed the imperial clan court, being the consort kin of highest repute today. Princesses of this dynasty resembled that of the former Song dynasty, having weak sense of existences. After marrying someone, the married couple of nobodies becoming estranged and ultimately ending in despair was a common occurrence. Princess Chengqing was an exception, however, because she had been birthed by Empress Dowager Zhou and the little sister of the current emperor. Only that layer to her identity was enough to make people look at her differently. This princess had a decent life, having married a husband of good temperament. His literary talent was no inferior to that of the average scholar, and when he was younger, he had been a handsome young man that had gotten into the late emperor's good graces. The princess and her consort had a great relationship, tied together in perfect harmony for over 20 years, a loving married couple that was the envy of everyone in the family. "Are you well, consort Zhou? The last time we parted was at the great court meeting. Seeing how you look so hale, you've been getting on fine, I presume." Zhou Jing differed from garbage consort kin like Wan Tong, so even Tang Fan didn't dare to be discourteous when seeing him, quickly getting off the sedan chair to greet him. Still, he was a bit perplexed because despite knowing of each other, they rarely interacted. Zhou Jing acted carefully in his words and actions, yet he had suddenly moved to intercept someone on the street. That was pretty extraordinary. "Hail." Zhou Jing smiled bitterly and pulled Tang Fan to a side. "Solan Tang, I came to ask for your help." Tang Fan was even more surprised at that. "Those are heavy words, consort Zhou." Zhou Jing sighed. "We are open people that don't speak in secrets. The situation is urgent, so I won't give you the runaround. Something happened in our home." "The princess estate?" "Precisely, ours, ha. I've been arguing with the princess over something these past few days. I heard that you're a god at solving cases, so I want to request that you help us determine this, lest the princess accuse me of being unjust." Princess Chengqing might hold favor, but after marrying into the Zhou family, she had shown considerable respect to her in-laws, not relying on her favor to act spoiled at all and thus earning praise. Forget about her having a huge fight with her husband. To say that Zhou Jing had run off to find him was already very odd. Contrary to Tang Fan's fondness for discovering truths, he absolutely did not want to get thrown in the middle of marital problems. As the saying went, upright officials would find it hard to judge familial matters. When the married couple quarreled from the head of the bed and reconciled at the foot, would he, as a middleman, not end up unlucky? Thus, upon hearing that, he smiled bitterly and replied, "I can't help you with this. Please look for someone more qualified than I." Then, he freed his sleeve from Zhou Jing and turned to flee. However, Zhou Jing moved a lot faster than him, grabbing his arm with such force. Tang Fan felt that if he tried to break away again, his official uniform would be yanked off, so he was forced to stop. "Consort Zhou, you and the princess are a married couple. If you have things to talk about, do sit down and talk about them, and then the rain will pass and the sky will clear up. Why the need to make this bigger than it is? I'm afraid I can't help you. You haven't heard me out yet. How could you know that you can't be of help?" Zhou Jing answered angrily. Tang Fan felt powerless. "You can see that my wind chill is not yet gone and I'm in the middle of hurrying home. Can't we speak about this another day?" What a joke. A princess and her consort having a row was not something he wanted a part in at all. "That's easy to deal with. Come back to our home for now. I'll have a good banquet prepared at the table and explain things to you in detail. In any case, you let me bump into you today, so you have to help me think of something. Solan Tang, I beg of you, if the princess keeps making a fuss and word gets around, I'll have nowhere to put my dignity." That set of words, both yielding and coercive, made Tang Fan unsure of whether to laugh or cry. Even if he wanted to refuse, he wouldn't be able to, because the man was holding fast to his sleeve. He sighed and asked, "Can't I just not go?" "No," Zhou Jing said decisively. The two of them were going back and forth in the middle of the street, and with their extraordinary status, they were attracting quite some attention. Seeing that if they didn't leave, the 5 districts' office was going to be summoned. Tang Fan could only submit and told the litter bearers to go make a report on his behalf, then get into Zhou Jing's carriage. The princess estate's carriage was spacious enough for 2 grown men to sit down in with room to spare. The seats were padded with thick silk cushions, leaving one barely able to feel the bumps of the wheels going on the road, but Tang Fan wasn't in the mood to appreciate it. Since he had just been in the blowing, cold wind outside, suddenly getting onto a warm carriage immediately caused him to sneeze, tears and snot both flowing out of him. Zhou Jing peered at him, saying with concern, "You're still young, Solan Tang. You have to take care of yourself." Tang Fan covered his mouth with a kerchief, inwardly rolling his eyes. "Who was the one that brought me here?" Seeming to sense his resentment, Zhou Jing laughed dryly. "I was backed into a corner, too. Please forgive me. Dare I ask the reason why you and the princess were fighting?" Tang Fan asked, powerless. No one else was around aboard the carriage, yet Zhou Jing kept it vague. "It's nothing more than a trivial thing. Once we're at the estate, I'll explain it to you." Tang Fan suddenly felt that something was off. Zhou Jing was a man of even temper and Princess Chongqing was not an arrogant woman. On top of that, they were not newlyweds. Even if there was any sort of immense conflict, which Tang Fan didn't believe there was, if it really was something major, why would Zhou Jing intercept a cabinet member halfway through his travel to invite him to his house to arbitrate? Tang Fan's relationship with Zhou Jing was not so deep that the other would allow him to make judgments on his familial matters, let alone a familial matter between a princess and her consort. Thinking of this, Tang Fan put away his handkerchief. His voice was a little stuffy from the wind chill, but he sounded sterner. "Is there something you need to tell me, consort?" Whenever he got serious, few could maintain nonchalance beneath his keen gaze. Zhou Jing was no exception, automatically shying away from it. "You will know very soon. Please don't ask further." The carriage stopped at the princess estate's front gate. The servants, upon seeing that a young man they had never seen before was with the consort, had some respect as well as curiosity in their actions. Mentally guessing after the other's status, they quickly came to know it, as the consort called him Solan. Solan was certainly not someone's courtesy name. Within the Great Ming, there were only 7 people that could be called that, the viziers, equivalent to prime ministers. They were subordinates to just one person and prevailed over many. Even though that position was less stable than the nobility of consort kin, founding families and influential families, frequently getting rotated every few years, it could not be denied that someone who could become a Solan was doubtlessly at the helm of power of the Great Ming and also determined the realm's fate. Also, this young man appeared to only be in his late 20s. If he was a Solan, an elder of the pavilion, could there have ever been such a young prime minister? Well, it wasn't like there wasn't one now, really. Well-informed servants quickly brought someone to mind, and the age of that man happened to match with this one in front of them. Still, they hadn't expected that the legendary young and promising Solan Tang was such a handsome, elegant character. While he was walking, he was constantly covering the lower half of his face, as if his health was not so good. Tang Fan didn't have the spare time to observe the reactions of the servants though, and Zhou Jing clearly had no thought to it, rushing forward with him non-stop. Even his smile was gone, which made Tang Fan nearly think that something major happened with the princess. That was, until they arrived at the study in the rear courtyard. The rear courtyard and even the study were generally not open to outsiders, unless they had an extremely familiar relationship with the host family. That was because the study was a key location, where people of status would often keep a large amount of important documents, the host's own family might not be allowed to enter it, to say nothing of guests. And yet, Zhou Jing had brought Tang Fan directly here. He opened the door, saying to someone inside, "Ah Shu, I invited him here." The one inside could be none other than Princess Chongqing. She was over 40 but her good looks were still prominent, making her look not a day over 30, looking not much older than Tang Fan. He didn't dare to slight her, cupping his hands in a bow. "May you be in good health, princess." The princess gave her husband a look and the latter understood. "I'll go outside for a walk. You two can talk, first." At this point, no matter how stupid Tang Fan was, he would have been able to realize that things were complicated. And he wasn't stupid at all. To have made her own husband keep watch outside himself, what she wanted to say must be of high importance. For that reason, Tang Fan didn't hurry to ask and instead waited for the other to speak first. She smiled bitterly. "Sir Tang, please excuse us for inviting you here, but this matter is unavoidably crucial. I don't have typical contact with you, but I have heard of your talents many times. Hence was why we boldly made a fuss. Please forgive us." Her tone was suave and soft, exactly as the rumors outside said. Completely lacking a princess's arrogance, she also diminished her posturing as soon as she spoke. Even if Tang Fan still had a thread of unhappiness, it would have long been overlooked. "There is no need to be so polite, princess. This humble official is here to listen." With that, Tang Fan had to take out a handkerchief, covered his mouth, coughed and then sniffed, ending it with a pained smile towards Princess Chongqing. "I'm still suffering from wind chill. Please excuse my rudeness." She knew well that the only rude ones were them, disregarding his illness to stubbornly intercept him off in the middle of his travels. However, she and her husband hadn't had a choice but to employ such a method. Her brows lightly creased, but it was not aimed at him. Rather, she was contemplating her words, seeming to think about whether she should say them or not. Tang Fan didn't prompt her. The two sat in silence, with only the sound of Zhou Jing's footsteps lightly echoing outside. After a good while, the princess slowly started. "When I went into the palace to visit Mother Empress, I hear that the crowned prince was ill, so I visited him while I was out." Hearing that this was related to the crowned prince, Tang Fan suddenly came to look a bit more serious, waiting for her to continue. "At the time, I didn't notice anything strange. Because he's ill and in poor spirits, I didn't remain for long, only for about a quarter hour before I took my leave. However, after returning home, I remember one thing, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt that something was off. He had wandered the palace in his youth. You must have heard of that, Sir Tang." Tang Fan nodded. It would not be good for the princess to bring up Consort Wan, but there was pretty much no one inside or outside of the palace that didn't know of that. When he was 3, he tripped and fell on a doorsill due to someone's negligence of his care, bumping his head open. It left a scar that can be seen to this day. I wasn't present at the time, so I only heard Mother Empress tell me of it later. What few know is that the prince also injured his pinky on his left hand during the fall, where a splinter had pierced skin and caused him to bleed. It caused a slight scar that can still be seen even today. She took a deep breath. However, when I met the crowned prince, I inadvertently glanced at his finger and I didn't see the scar. At this point in the conversation, she had only been saying what she had seen, but the implication hidden inside of her words was alarming. Tang Fan's brow lightly furrowed. "Are you sure that the scar can still be seen today?" The princess grimaced. "I'm not sure that I hadn't seen wrongly. This is not a small matter, so I'm too afraid to rashly enter the palace to confirm it. However, when I met the prince a month ago, I did see a tiny scar on his hand. There's no way that in the span of a month, a scar that he's had since childhood has suddenly vanished." "What about the scar on his forehead?" "It's still there." "When you first entered the East Palace, did you come across anything that was different from before?" She thought. "No, actually. Were the prince's behaviors or speech abnormal? I only said a few things to him. He was laying on bed at the time and I couldn't see anything wrong at that time. What of the people at his side? Was anyone swapped out? I don't think so, but I don't interact with him much ordinarily, and rarely pay attention to his attendants. Seeing Tang Fan mutter to himself, she sighed. I know that this is too ridiculous and hard to believe. If I saw wrongly then it would be nothing, and I would suffer a reprimand at worst, but if it's true, the consequences will be beyond imagination. We were thinking about it but didn't dare to make too big of a fuss, so we had to invite you here under the pretense of a quarrel. As you see it, how should I handle this? Tang Fan smiled painfully. This humble official has never seen the prince recently. It's much too hard to make a judgment on this. I know that I've caused trouble for you, sir, the princess apologized. Everything was solely based on her suspicion, which evidence was a scar that was so subtle, it was nearly imperceptible. Her not having seen that scar didn't exactly mean that the prince she saw was a fake, maybe shining light had led to her seeing things. Furthermore, impersonating the crowned prince was such a huge thing that once the conspiracy came to light, not only would the perpetrator lose their head but it would implicate a huge number of people. Thus, the princess had been too afraid to say something and only able to quietly get Zhou Jing to bring Tang Fan for a discussion. How about I go into the palace and ask Mother Empress, she proposed. He shook his head. The Empress Dowager and the crowned prince might not meet much more than you do. People in the palace talk too much, so it would be bad if things got too conspicuous. As that's so, this humble official will find someone to ask about it before I come to a conclusion. The princess sighed in relief. That's the best way. I hope that I just saw wrongly. The curtain of night slowly descended. Today was the 4th of the first month. All officials were on vacation, every bureau in the capital stopping business. Even so, the streets in the capital did not become lively because of the New Year's festival. The only lively areas were the market on Deng Shikao and a few alleys in the vicinity. Everywhere else remained the same, going quiet after nightfall. An inconspicuous, plain litter parked at the back entrance of a similarly inconspicuous residence. A litter bearer came up to knock on the door, the sound not loud, so that the surrounding neighbors wouldn't be alerted. Not long after, the door was opened from the inside by a middle-aged man with sharp features. He said something quietly to the litter bearer for a short bit, who turned back and stooped to say something unknown to the litter's cabin, immediately after which someone disembarked it and entered the residence. A stick of incense later, that person came out from inside, got on the litter, and quickly left from there. Less than a quarter hour after the other left, the door opened yet again, and the middle-aged man also left in a rush, his figure quickly fading into the night. No one had expected that this would all fall into the eyes of someone with motive. The Forbidden City. Wang Zhi's steps were a bit faster than before. He couldn't see much of it, but the eunuch behind him was trying pretty hard to follow. The latter dared not complain, only able to quietly quicken his pace while praying that the lantern he held wouldn't go out because of this. By coincidence, right as he thought of that, a burst of cold wind blew and the candle swayed a few times, as if it was actually about to go out. He jumped in fright and looked at eunuch Wang up ahead, but the other didn't even turn his head. Honestly, were he not worried about being too eye-catching, Wang Zhi would have gone even faster. But he couldn't do so now. After Huaiyan's departure, his subordinates had almost all been eradicated and replaced by Liang Fang's people. Even the Eastern Depot was no exception. As Chenzun no longer occupied the spot of chief eunuch, having quickly been booted off to the supervisory of seals to feed the mosquitoes. Why did Liang Fang have this confidence and lack of fear about being reprimanded by the emperor? It was related to the one backing him, no question. Wang Zhi remained, and it was kind of hard for him to clap one-handed. The reason he had not been struck down together with Huaiyan was because of his sly conduct, unlike how Huaiyan clearly stood on the side of the crowned prince and civil officials, and that it was still by Consort Wan's hand that he had received promotions. After Huai'an left, he had aptly drawn closer to and yielded to the Wan party. That posturing had paralyzed them and had allowed him to stay, but the price he had paid was leaving the two important spots of the supervisories of royal steeds and ceremony management, and going to the supervisory of glyphs. He still had some manpower, but they all had needed to be repositioned after he returned to the palace. Many hadn't been able to climb into the corresponding spots, meaning that their power was relatively small and they could not fulfill a role. People inside the palace felt more comfortable than those outside of it. People had soon gone to kick him while he was downed upon, seeing that he had lost power, but he was not someone that could be bullied easily. After his return to the palace, his aggressiveness was restrained beneath a gentle, low-key disguise, and the adaptable eunuch Wang remembered those people's visage, having jotted them down onto his blacklist long ago. If anyone believed that he was living a miserable life inside the palace, they would be horribly wrong, though. An emaciated camel was still bigger than a horse. Eunuch Wang still grasped his own influence, and Huai'an had even transferred some of his own people to him. As a result, Liang Fang didn't dare to push too much against Wang Ji. After crowding Huai'an out, he had turned a blind eye to Wang Ji, else the two deeply rooted great eunuchs would be forced into desperate straits and counter-attack him. The end results could be a loss for both sides. Wang Ji had never told Tang Fan about these difficulties. No matter how formidable the latter was, his abilities were limited, and besides that, outside subjects could not meddle in palace matters. Such was greatly forbidden. Ever since Wang Ji had returned to the palace, the two had subconsciously diminished contact. This thread was to go unused unless it was absolutely necessary. Countless one-time contacts, all for the sake of the crowned prince. This time was no exception. Once he received Wei Mao's tip-off, he couldn't wait to find an excuse to go into the East Palace. He had to see with his own eyes before he could be at ease. Usually, at this hour, the crowned prince might still be studying, but with his recent illness, he would go to bed early. It looked pretty unusual for Wang Ji to request an audience in the middle of the night, so he was inevitably barred outside, where the East Palace members informed him that the crowned prince had since gone to sleep. However, Wang Ji was not powerless. He had brought with him the Empress Dowager's statement. The Empress Dowager was listening to sutras and suddenly heard a medicinal sutra. Thinking about the crowned prince's illness, I was ordered to come bless him with Buddhist sutras, so that he might recover a bit sooner. As the Empress Dowager had spoken, the East Palace people didn't continue to block him, going in to make a report. Not long after, he came out again to say that the crowned prince was awake and was willing to see him. Hearing that, Wang Ji stepped forth. The recently extinguished candles in the bedroom were lit up again with an arm-thick candle which brightly lit up most of the hall. The bed curtain was half drawn, and the crowned prince was supporting himself into a sitting position, preparing to go change his clothes. Wang Ji stopped him. "Please don't bother, Your Highness." The prince didn't fight it, smiling at him. His expression had a hard to conceal weariness and weakness. "I'll have to trouble you with bringing my thanks to grandmother, Eunuch Wang. When I get better in a few days, I will go to thank her." His words and actions were not strange at all, his intonation the same as ever. Wang Ji didn't see him every day, but he interacted with him often. In his opinion, at least, there was nothing off. Still, the prince had doubtlessly lost a lot of weight, his cheeks slightly sunken and some blue lines were around his eyes, which was a bit alarming. "No need to be polite, Your Highness. Eunuch Huai is very concerned about you, and if he hears that you're ill, he might get pretty anxious." The crowned prince smiled bitterly at that. "I'm useless. I couldn't protect Huai'an, I really let him down." Those words weren't flawed, Wang Ji thought to himself. Then, he witnessed the crown prince cough like his lungs were tearing apart, the manner of which was simply frightening. The servant nearby quickly stepped up to pat the prince on the back. Wang Ji scanned his surroundings briefly, asking, Your Highness, why don't I see Kui Yang? That was the prince's personal attendant. I've been coughing through the night and can't fall asleep. I once was prescribed some calming pills by the Imperial Hospital before and they've already been used up. He went to ask for some for me. The prince then asked the servant, is he still not back yet? No. Attendant Kui left a little under half a session ago. There was no issue with that sentence. Wang Zhi couldn't pick any faults out of it, at least. He decided that he was going to leave the East Palace and go take a look in the hospital. While the servant spoke, his eyes inadvertently flitted across the crown prince's left pinky. The other's lower half was covered by a blanket, both of his hands placed to the sides, his left one lightly gripping the blanket, its pinky happened to be obscured. Wang Zhi couldn't exactly grab his hand to check it over. Eunuch Wang. Wang Zhi snapped out of it. Do you have an order, Your Highness? The crowned prince smiled powerlessly. I asked you just now, are you used to being in the supervisory of glyphs yet? Do you want me to speak to Father Emperor, so you can return to the supervisory of royal steeds? Wang Zhi shook his head. Thank you for your goodwill, but it's not too appropriate for you to speak on this. So that you aren't implicated, please don't speak about it. At that, the crowned prince sighed, saying nothing. You should take medicine, Your Highness, the servant nearby whispered. It wouldn't be good for Wang Zhi to stick around, so he took his leave upon seeing this. In the end, he was not as familiar with the crowned prince as Huayan was. If the latter was still around, he would be able to tell if something was off with the prince better than he could. Unfortunately, Huayan was still burning incense for the great ancestor in Nanjing, too far away to be of help. Wang Zhi left the East Palace for the hospital. Kui Yang was indeed there, because the pills needed to be made on demand. He was in the middle of helping the imperial physicians. Wang Zhi asked him a few things about nothing other than the crowned prince's condition. Judging by Kui Yang's tone, he didn't believe that anything was amiss with him. Wang Zhi had reaped nothing at all from this trip. He almost suspected that because he typically pushed Tang Fan around, the other had seized a chance to mess with him, instead. However, that idea was fleeting. Wang Zhi knew that Tang Fan wasn't like that. When it came to serious business, he was never vague about things. Wang Zhi had no idea that Tang Fan was being cautious from hearing Princess Chongqing out. Because Wei Mao had been their middle person and time had been limited, Tang Fan hadn't been able to explain things in full, only able to tell Wei Mao to pass word on for Wang Zhi to pay more attention to the crowned prince. Due to this, Wang Zhi had gone to the Empress Dowager in the middle of the night to acquire Buddhist sutras and deliver them to the East Palace, yet he had found absolutely nothing. He returned to his own residence. A home outside of the palace was inferior in comfort to one inside it, but with Wang Zhi's seniority, him wanting to arrange the house he lived in comfortably was no issue. He had his subordinating eunuch get water boiling, comfortably soaked in a hot bath, then sat on his bed with his blanket in his arms, beginning to analyze things. Having interacted with Tang Fan for such a long time, he had learned how to emulate the other's way of thinking, but after pondering for a long while, he still couldn't figure anything out. Forget it. This bothersome junk is something for Tang Fluffy to do. Wang Zhi put out the light and went to bed. However, he hadn't expected that before he could send news out of the palace the next day, the 5th of the month, the very day court officials were to resume their jobs, Tang Fan would be denounced. End chapter. The 14th year of Chenghua. Chapter 147. Eunuch Wang's Special Act. Tang Fan had been denounced because someone had seen him come in and out of Wang Zhi's residence in the capital, and that very night, Wang Zhi had gone to the East Palace to visit the crowned prince. A cabinet member and a eunuch being too close was a great taboo. Regardless of whether there actually was a direct connection between the two, the coincidence in timing was enough for someone with an ulterior motive to connect the dots. Therefore, the censor's points in denouncing Tang Fan were very clear. he was spying upon the palace's internal matters for some unfathomable motive. According to due process, Tang Fan had to reflect upon himself at home and must not go to the cabinet for work, and then send a memorial defending himself. However, it was unknown what had gone wrong in the middle of this, but his memorial didn't reach the emperor at all, the matter getting dragged out without limit. Unable to get the emperor's answer, Tang Fan had to keep staying at home, his return date uncertain. Who knew how to react to this? Lu Jian and Su Pu had sought out head of the cabinet Wanan and requested that he help Tang Fan speak, and the latter had agreed on the surface, but who knew whether he had actually visited the emperor? In any case, every day that the emperor said nothing was a day he couldn't return to the cabinet. Lu Jian and Su Pu, clearly seeing Wanan's indifference, went to see the emperor themselves, wanting to ask him about it to his face, yet were told that he was in poor health and wasn't seeing anyone. With things coming to this, Tang Fan was unsure of who on his own side was watching his every move in secret. As a last resort for avoiding suspicion, the line of contact between Wang Zhi and himself was forced to break. Wang Zhi had been hoping that Tang Fan would help him resolve this suspicion, yet hadn't expected that the Wang group would strike first, directly cutting him off from his outside help. Tang Fan was not going to be able to contact him for the time being. It wouldn't be impossible for them to have contact, of course, but that would doubtlessly give others an easy handle to grab, sweeping Tang Fan completely into dangerous territory. Wang Zhi was no saint that paid good unto evil, but he wouldn't do anything that would implicate a friend. Now, he could only rely upon himself. Life in the supervisory of glyphs was far more leisurely than serving by the emperor's side, but Wang Zhi also couldn't frequently run off to the East Palace to check on the crown prince. As of right now, his responsibilities clearly had nothing to do with the East Palace, and if he always went in and out of it, that would likely fall into the eyes of someone with motive, causing him headache. He needed to find a loophole elsewhere. He really hoped that the information Tang Fan had passed on was wrong, and that there was nothing wrong with the crown prince. If there wasn't, however, the Wang group's actions would clearly be bizarre. It had been Consort Wan's idea to have the crown prince go pray on behalf of the emperor. Now that censors were being directed to denounce Tang Fan, the shadow of the Wang group was faintly visible behind. If there were no conspiracy going on, why would the Wang group have gone to so much trouble doing all of this? However, in terms of conspiracy, was the crown prince's illness due to a downpour something that the group could have calculated for ahead of time? If they were gutsy enough to replace the crown prince, where could the opportunity have been? He still remembered that in order to prevent the crown prince from meeting with mishaps on his personal journey to pray, himself, Tang Fan, and others had preemptively speculated on what might happen during the process. Their ultimate discovery had been that the most dangerous possibility was the incense stick's worth of time he was in the Longevity Palace, because he would have to be alone in the repose room. Had someone been lurking inside ahead of time and took that chance to assassinate him, no one would be able to prevent it. In light of that, right before the crown prince's trip, Suizhou had brought people to search the repose room inside and out, then confirmed that there were no hidden people, as well as no sort of hidden compartments whatsoever. On top of that, the prince had been accompanied by attendants all throughout the process, and there was no way he could have been swapped out while everyone was watching. Upon thinking of this, Wang Zhi recalled a phrase Tang Fan said almost daily: perfect people or things have never existed in the world, and alleged perfection is likely being used to divert attention to some flaw. Wang Zhi attempted to imitate Tang Fan's method of thinking, reconstructing everything that had happened that day. Then, he thought of a crucial detail, something likely everyone had overlooked. The carriage. Yes, the carriage. While everyone's focus had been gathered on the most probable dangers and loopholes, another possible danger had been neglected. After the crowned prince left the palace, in addition to the repose room, an opportunity where he was isolated was inside the carriage, which was even longer than the period he had been inside the monastery. The convoy had been a force, the sound of its travel loud. If something happened in the carriage and the sound could be muffled, it would have very likely gone unnoticed. More importantly, the carriage had been further adjusted to imitate the emperor's own carriage just before the crowned prince had left, specially expedited in its creation. Before that, there had been no specialized carriage made for him to leave the palace in. With that thought, Wang Zhi couldn't sit still. He sought out his confidant. The other was a minor lead of the supervisory of hall oversight, who did all the minor work he was assigned randomly. Go to the supervisory of miscellany, try to find the carriage that the crowned prince used to leave the palace, and check to see if there's anything wrong with it, he said to him. The man understood nothing. What do you want to check for, my lord? The crowned prince only used it once after such a long time, and no one knew when he would leave the palace next. As this follower sees it, the carriage was likely to be dismantled after some time. Wang Zhi hadn't expected that upset, caught off guard. Can the pieces still be found, then? The other smiled apologetically. It's possible, but the wheels and cabin and such must have been put into the supervisory of miscellaneous storehouse. What do you want to investigate? Please explain, so that this follower may not wonder so much. Go and see if there's a spot or hidden compartment where someone could be hidden. The other was dumbstruck. Huh. This is extremely serious. Speak nothing of this, or else you and I won't be having good ends. Understand? The other nodded repeatedly, leaving with his orders. Today was the 9th of the first month. It was a very ordinary day. The yellow calendar wrote, everything is going to go wrong. This was the 4th day of Tang Fan's denouncement. He was idling about at home, and with how Wang Zhi understood him, probably happy to take the opportunity to be lazy. The crowned prince's condition was still off and on, his illness lingering. It could not be said to be horrible, but it was also not completely gone. The imperial physician's wording remained vague, which was their typical style. On account of the great Ming's official vacation system differing from the previous dynasties, their time off did not go straight from the Spring Festival to after the Lantern Festival. They had to resume duty in the middle of it, so today was a day for bureau work. Since the emperor had been ill for many days, all matters were being decided upon by the cabinet. At this time, its members ought to be busy with evaluating letters sent from all over the country, in their respective workspaces. Of course, they might still be having meetings, but Lu Jian was always having disputes over disagreements with Peng Hua and Yinji. Without Tang Fan's presence, Lu Jian and Su Pu fell increasingly downwind, with Lu Cotton Flower swaying between the two sides, as was normal. This appeared to no sort of different than other days. Perhaps because the feeling of the new year had not yet dissipated, the joy on the palace-goers' faces had not yet gone, with even their clothes appearing to be a lot brighter than usual, the strings used to tie up their hair also brand new. A springtime aura permeated all over the place. The confidant that was helping him inquire around the supervisory of miscellany had yet to return, but for some reason, Wang Zhi felt a general sense of vague unease, an intuition that had come from being immersed within the palace for many years. It was like something was about to happen. Would it be a good something, or bad? He raised his head to look at the sky. It was azure and limitless, clouds rolling and unfurling. Winter's cold had gradually passed. Even flocks of geese were beginning to show up, crossing overhead, leaving drawn-out honks behind that lingered in the ear. Even though he was only on his 20s and hadn't been back at the palace for too many years, he felt like his days of crisscrossing the desert were from a previous life. He had grown up in the palace, yet he wasn't accustomed to it despite it being towering and majestic. In his eyes, it wasn't as charming as the views outside. If he could have chosen, he never would have wanted to return. He was walking down a long palace road, followed by two young eunuchs. He was going in the direction of the Palace of Benevolence and Life, about to meet with the Empress Dowager so that he could get someone to check on the crowned prince, using her as an excuse. Due to the minute unease in his heart, he quickened his pace. The two eunuchs behind him nearly couldn't keep up, both dripping with sweat from the effort. All of a sudden, a few rushing figures turned from a corner up ahead of them, all palace servants. They hurried towards Wang Ji with pale faces, steps quick, and were seen to bypass Wang Ji, not seeing him at all. He recognized them. They were all maids and eunuchs from the palace of manifest virtue, responsible for serving consort Wan. For them to be in such a panic, there was no question that something big had happened. Wang Ji grabbed a maid that was running by him, asking, "What's going on?" The maid appeared to only now noticed him. She appeared to be about to cry. "Eu! Eunuch Wang! What happened, really? Why are you this flustered?" He was getting more impatient than her. Her companions had long hurried forth, not even noticing that one of them was being left behind. She gasped for air. The noble consort, something happened to her. What? Wang Ji was greatly shocked on the inside, yet he didn't bat an eye on the surface. His Majesty had an affair with a maid of the palace of manifest virtue, she stammered out. After the consort found out, she was furious and summoned the maid to reprimand her. The maid spoke out against her, the consort grew angry and she beat her herself, but then she fainted all of a sudden. That was definitely something she would do. Wang Ji had been by her side for many years. No one understood what kind of person she was better than he did. Half of her overbearing personality was inborn and the other half had come about from the emperor's pampering. Even though she no longer forbids harem women from bearing heirs, if she discovered it, the other party would inevitably suffer a round of verbal abuse. Furthermore, that maid had talked back to her face. With how her personality was, how could Consort Wan have not been intensely angry? Had she fainted due to anger attacking her heart, that would not be difficult to understand. Prior to this, her health had not really been that great. On occasion, she would suffer chronic heart problems, or dizziness at other times, but she typically didn't need to be bedridden like the emperor, which made her seem a little better. Were Tang Fan around, he definitely would have been worried about the fate of the maid that had angered the noble consort, but Wang Ji had seen this sort of thing so much, he placed no importance upon it at all after hearing about it. He was more concerned about something else. Was there actually something seriously wrong with the noble consort? Thinking of this, he released the maid, allowing her to tearfully catch up with her companions. She wasn't worried about Consort Wan, of course, but concerned about her own fate. Wang Ji stopped in his tracks, not continuing to go forward. He told a eunuch beside him to go straight to the palace of manifest virtue and ask around, then turned into a palace room piled with junk, as if familiar with it. "Aren't you curious as to why I brought you here?" he asked the other eunuch that was following him. The other's name was Wen Sheng. He had been in the palace for many years, was a few years younger than Wang Ji and reticent. He had once been in charge of miscellaneous tasks in the supervisory of hall oversight, later getting transferred to Wang Ji's side. Wen Sheng was silent for a moment. "You always have a reason for doing things, eunuch Wang." His reticence was actually just out of being ineloquent, nothing beyond life in the palace making him most afraid of speaking too much. What Wang Ji liked about it was his quietness and his loyalty, as it were. Rolling his eyes, Wang Ji was about to teach him a lesson, but the other eunuch he had sent out, Wen Yuan, had already returned. After his trip, his expression had turned rather unsightly, nearly matching those palace servants from just recently. Seeing his expression, Wang Ji's heart sank, and he immediately threw his plan to lecture up to the clouds. "What is it?" The noble consort, the other's tongue was a bit tied and it took a lot time for it to smooth out. "She's dead." Wen Sheng's face twisted up. He couldn't help but glance at Wang Ji. And when he did, he immediately admired him more, because the other's expression remained unchanged and even his voice was calm. "Are you sure?" Truthfully, after hearing the prior news, Wang Ji had already made mental anticipations and preparations, so he wasn't overly surprised. "There should be no mistake," Wen Yuan quickly answered. Everyone is wailing in the palace of manifest virtue. This lowly one was too afraid to get in close out of fear of attracting attention, so I only secretly found a few people to ask. They all said she isn't breathing. Have the imperial physicians come over? Not yet, but it's been such a long time. He didn't continue, but his implication was obvious. If too long passed, even if the physicians rushed over, they probably wouldn't be able to resuscitate her. Listening to the end, Wang Zhi's face was as cold as water, and he was silent. Wen Yuan and Wen Sheng exchanged a look, not going to disturb his thoughts. In Wang Zhi's view, it had been by Consort Wan's grace that he had been promoted. The news of her sudden death had beyond shocked him. Were he to say that he wasn't a tiny bit sorrowful, that would be a lie. However, that sorrow passed quickly. He had to face an issue that was a lot grimmer. In the harem, concubines dying was commonplace. If one wasn't an empress, no waves would be raised. Consort Wan was no empress, but her status exceeded that of one. While she had never directly meddled in politics, the Wan group's influence was everywhere. Despite having the power to overturn society, the Wan group did not have abilities or prerequisites to rebel. Ever since the Ming Dynasty's founding, no major officials had ever rebelled. Their arrogance came from the emperor's indulgence, and the reason he indulged them was, ultimately, because he loved the crow that came with the house and he was giving regard to Consort Wan's reputation. Even though he indulged them now, ultimately, they relied on nothing further than Consort Wan as a source. Without her, their capital arrogance no longer existed. Like a hall constructed out of snow, it would melt with the sunrise. As could be imagined, in the wake of her death, many who had previously been harassed by the Wan group, who was too afraid to speak up due to backlash, would use this chance to step up and get revenge. When the tree fell, its monkeys would scatter according to trend, the Wan group would quickly fall to pieces. Still, its members weren't idiots. Who would ever be willing to hand over power that they were already holding? Who would be willing to sit and wait for their demise? They would inevitably counterattack, or even strike first. Once the news of Consort Wan's death spread outwards, it would surely cause unrest inside and out, all troops beginning to get restless. From this day onwards, things would change. With this information, Wang Zhi didn't stay still for one moment, immediately going in the opposite direction of the Palace of Manifest Virtue. "Eunuch Wang, where are we going now?" Wen Yuan asked. "The East Palace." Wang Zhi didn't turn his head. Following Tang Fan's denouncement, Wang Zhi had felt that going to the East Palace again would alert the enemy, but he had changed his mind, now. With Consort Wan's death, the Wan group would inevitably be harried. If anything was off with the Crown Prince, now was the time to unveil the truth. The East Palace had not yet learned of Consort Wan's death, as the Crowned Prince was sick and was on bed rest. He hadn't even invited his teachers over for lectures in days. On account of their master's illness, the lower servants were too afraid to even speak too loudly, afraid to disturb the bedridden prince. Wang Zhi's bustling arrival caught all of them unprepared. Kui Yang, hearing the news, quickly came up to welcome him. "Are you well, Eunuch Wang? What are you here for?" Wang Zhi didn't have time to exchange pleasantries with him, immediately asking, "Where is His Highness?" Perhaps he was too intense, as Kui Yang was too afraid to hide it from him. "He's resting inside. I'll go in and..." Before he could finish, Wang Zhi pushed him aside and barged in. Kui Yang was scared pale, watching as Wang Zhi strode right up to the crowned prince's bed, lunged at the prince as he was reclined and reading a book, and said, "Excuse my rudeness, Your Highness." Then, while the crowned prince was surprised, he grabbed the other's left wrist, bowed his head and took a look. By means of the bright light coming in from outside the hall, Wang Zhi was able to clearly see the skin texture of the prince's hand, including the very faint, barely noticeable scar on his pinky. It was in place. Wang Zhi couldn't say for sure whether he ought to sigh in relief or be mad at Tang Fan's unreliability. Right then, Kui Yang rushed up, attempting to push Wang Zhi out of the way to take on a protective pose in front of the prince, firmly guarding him. Wang Zhi, how dare you? Wang Zhi didn't allow him to push him, of course, dodging on his own initiative once Kui Yang had started moving. Please forgive me for my rudeness, Your Highness, he said, cupping his hands. Before the crowned prince could ask questions, he explained what Tang Fan had requested that he investigate. The prince was not mad at this, merely amused. Solon Tang suspected that someone replaced me. Kui Yang's expression relaxed, as well. That's too much of a joke, Eunuch Wang. I follow His Highness all day long, would I not be able to detect whether he was real or not? Wang Zhi shook his head, expression serious. I would prefer it if I was joking, but Tang Fan has always been someone that can be entrusted with major events. If he said that, he must have some evidence for it. If such a thing actually happened, the consequences will be unimaginable, which is why I braved an irredeemable crime to come seek the truth. After that, his gaze remained fixed on the other, as if not relinquishing the idea to check for flaws. The prince was collected, not showing the slightest bit of panic due to his words, and instead suggesting, as that's so, how about you test me, Eunuch Wang? You and I have known each other for years, and there are some things we each know that the other would only know. If I was a fake, there would be no way for me to know each of them. That made sense to Wang Zhi. When Huai recommended the subject to you, he said a series of words. Do you remember them? The prince thought for a bit, then said. Not individually, but he said something like your martial arts are strong, and because you're on Consort Wan's side, if I accidentally offended her, I could ask you to mediate on my behalf. Wang Zhi betrayed nothing, asking, Huai also evaluated Tang Fan's personality in one sentence. Can you remember that one? This time, the crowned prince didn't need to think, answering with, even though he is a civil official, he is loyal to the core, carries righteousness about his shoulders and plans benevolently in worldly governance. Now, Wang Zhi had no more doubts. When Huai had said that, only the crowned prince had been on scene with him. Even if someone was pretending to be him and was imitating him perfectly, there was no way they would have been able to memorize every one of those words. Wang Zhi sighed in relief. Thank you for dispelling my doubts. This subject has been reckless, please forgive my offense, Your Highness. You and Solon Tang are only racking your brains on my behalf. How could I blame you, when I haven't yet expressed my appreciation enough? However, I've been loitering about in bed and just heard Kui Yang say that Solon Tang was chased back home. Did such a thing happen? What can I help him with? Plead for him with Father Emperor, maybe. I'm afraid that His Majesty has no time to meet with you right now. The Crown Prince was startled. Why so? Consort Wan just passed away, Wang Zhi replied, carefully. The prince and Kui Yang both gasped, struck mute. Before they could respond, someone came to report the news of Consort Wan's demise. This had come much too suddenly. The crowned prince aside, even the Wan group likely wasn't mentally prepared at all. In everyone's thoughts, were someone to be said to be dying prematurely due to illness, that someone would have to be the constantly ill emperor, not the much healthier-looking Consort Wan. The reason why she had tried her hardest to depose the crowned prince was that after the emperor's lifespan was up, she could rise to be the empress dowager. In wanting wind, one must get wind, in wanting rain, one must get rain. And yet, the emperor was still perfectly alive, and so was the crowned prince, while the one who had always been wanting to grab everything up in her hands had taken the first step out. Of all the fickle, absurd events in the world, nothing could beat this. At this moment, the palace would inevitably be in a lot of turmoil. Wang Zhi didn't have the spare time to care about the crowned prince's response. After confirming that the prince was not a fake, he quickly left the East Palace, returning to the supervisory of glyphs. The eunuch he had ordered to go ask around the supervisory of miscellany also returned. He gave Wang Zhi one very important message: the carriage that had brought the crown prince to the longevity palace had indeed had an issue. Beneath the carriage, an extra 4-square chi groove had been constructed, big enough to hold someone curled up inside. Wang Zhi, who had been under the impression that Tang Fan had been making something out of nothing, had not had any time to get the boulder off of his heart before it was suspended by this bit of information. End chapter.